Ladies and gentlemen, let us all rise for the arrival of the Honorable Senate President and the Senators of the Republic of the Philippines.
The 8th session of the Senate and the first regular session of the 18th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Richard Gordon will lead the chamber in prayer.
Lord, August is the 8th month of the year, and it was named after Augustus Caesar. To be august means to be respected and impressive. And therefore, Lord, we ask that this Senate remains respected and impressive at all times. But more than that, Lord, we ask for the discernment para makita po natin na tagos sa mga nangyayari sa ating kapaligiran ang kailangan natin gawin para sa ating bansa. Nalulula po kami pag nakikita po namin ang isang pamilya noong Abril 15, yung Canes family ng Mandawi, Cebu. Naglalako ng kanilang mga damit, kasama ang kanilang 8-year-old son, tapos biglang pinagbabaril at namatay. Nalulula po ako kaninang tanghali habang kumakain ako doon sa bahay nang makita po natin na ang isang pamilya doon sa Parañaque ay pinagbabaril yung kanyang anak, 2 anak at kanyang asawa. At patay po lahat. At ito po mga panahon na ito, we have to really look for your guidance, Lord, on how we can address the problems of this country. And we address it by your prayer taught to us by Saint Francis of Assisi, after whom our present Pope has named himself Francis. And he says, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. When there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love, for it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Pahabol lang po. Maraming pong salamat sa for the gift of friendship, the gift of the Senate, our colleagues, for wishing Senator Villanueva and myself on our birthday, a happy birthday. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you to all our colleagues.
The Secretary will please call the roll.
Roll call of members, the Honorable Senators Angara, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, De La Rosa, Drilon, Gatchalian, Go, Gordon, Ontiveros, Lacson, Lapid, Marcos, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Tolentino, Villanueva, Villar, Zubiri, Senate President Soto III.
With 21 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we have before we take up official matters, we have a lot of guests in the gallery today, most especially the Secretary of the Department of Agrarian Reform is with us, Secretary John Castrucciones, together with his undersecretaries, Yusek Pagyo and Yusek Padilla of the DAR. We also have with us Pagadian City Mayor Samiko and Councilor Tyraco is with us as well here. And I believe we have with us as well the distinguished gentleman from Cebu, the former Deputy Speaker, now Congressman once again, Ed Gullas, and his son, Mayor Sam Gullas of Talisay. Oh, apo pala. Apo si may inaanak, si Sam Gullas of Talisay City.
We welcome all our guests to the Senate.
May nakalimutan ba ako? Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 7th Session, Monday, August 5, 2019, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion is approved. Journal is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for the reference of business.
Secretary will proceed to the reference of business.
Reference of business, bills on first reading. Senate number 501 entitled An Act Addressing the System of Prostitution, Imposing Penalties on its Perpetrators, Providing Protective Measures and Support Services for its Victims, Repealing for the Purpose Articles 202 and 341 of the Penal Code, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
Referred to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights and the Committee on Finance.
Senate number 502, an act requiring the issuance of employment certification in favor of resigned, dismissed, or separated employees and providing penalties for violation therefore, amending for this purpose the Labor Code of the Philippines, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
Referred to the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development.
Senate number 503, an act mandating the use of surveillance cameras for security, safety, and accountability in government offices, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
Referred to the Committees on Civil Service and Finance.
Senate number 504, an act recognizing the civil effects of church annulment decree, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
To the Committee on Women.
Senate number 505, an act amending Executive Order number 209, otherwise known as the Family Code of the Philippines and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
To the Committee on Women.
Senate number 506, an act creating and establishing the Philippine High School for Sports, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
To the Committees on Basic Education, Arts and Culture, Sports, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Senate number 507, an act exempting the importation of certain medicines from customs duty and value-added tax, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
Senate number 508, an act exempting the importation of medical devices and equipment from customs duty and value-added tax, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
Committee on Ways and Means.
Senate number 509, an act protecting the right of athletes to represent the Philippines as part of the national team and providing penalties for violations thereof, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
To the Committee on Sports.
Senate number 510, an act instituting a national land use policy, providing the implementing mechanisms therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
To the Committees on Environment, Urban Planning, and Finance.
Senate number 511, an act implementing the right of the people to information on matters of public concern guaranteed under 1987 Philippine Constitution and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Cayetano.
To the Committees on Public Information, Government Organization.
Mr. President, can
Yes,
we
the
move to
Minority
adjourn
Leader.
the other session in this hall?
Maybe ask the Sergeant at Arms to adjourn the session at the back of the hall. Session suspended.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session resumed. The Last Senate bill that was
511.
read is 510.
511.
511, it's referred to the Committees on Public Information and Civil Service.
Senate Number 512, an act providing for a Magna Carta of tricycle drivers and operators, institutionalizing mechanisms for its implementation and for other purposes, introduced by Senator De La Rosa.
To the Committee on Public Services and Local Government.
Senate Number 513, an act strengthening the drug abuse prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation, amending for the purpose Republic Act Number 9165, otherwise known as the Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002 as amended, and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator De La Rosa.
To the Committees on Public Order, Health, and Finance.
Senate Number 514, an act providing for the modernization of the Philippine National Police and for other purposes, introduced by Senator De La Rosa.
To the Committee on Public Order, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Senate Number 515, an act modernizing the crime investigation techniques of law enforcement agencies and for other purposes, introduced by Senator De La Rosa.
To the Committee on Public Order.
Senate Number 516, an act declaring a national peace policy, thereby creating a commission on peace, introduced by Senator De La Rosa.
To the Committees on Peace, Unification and Reconciliation, Civil Service, and Finance.
Senate Number 517, an act amending Republic Act Number 7183, otherwise known as an act regulating the sale, manufacture, distribution, and use of firecrackers and other pyrotechnic devices and for other purposes, introduced by Senator De La Rosa.
To the Committees on Public Order and Trade.
Senate Number 518, an act mandating law enforcement personnel to wear a body camera during law enforcement and special police operations, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator De La Rosa.
To the Committees on Public Order and Finance.
Senate Number 519, an act instituting reforms in real property valuation in the Philippines, establishing the National Valuation Authority and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Ways and Means, Local Government, and Finance.
Senate Number 520, an act prohibiting the use of pyramid schemes or chain distribution plans in doing business and providing penalties therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Trade and Finance.
Senate Number 521, an act converting the Don Carlos Polytechnic College into a state college to be known as Don Carlos Polytechnic State College, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Higher Technical and Vocational Education, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Senate Number 522, an act establishing a Center for Autism and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Health, Women, and Finance.
Senate Number 523, an act providing for a system of redistributing and recycling food waste to promote food security, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Agriculture, Social Justice, and Finance.
Senate Number 524, an act institutionalizing the bamboo industry development in the Philippines, creating the Bamboo Industry Research and Development Center, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Trade, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Senate Number 525, an act banning the catching, sale, purchase, possession, transportation, importation, and exportation of all sharks and rays or any part thereof in the country, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Environment.
Senate Number 526, an act to develop the rubber industry, establishing for the purpose the Philippine Rubber Industry Development Board, defining its powers and functions and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Finance.
Senate Number 527, an act providing for the issuance of a list of low-lying areas of the Philippine territory vulnerable to rising sea levels as a result of climate change and areas at high risk for natural disasters, mandating the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, Department of Science and Technology, Climate Change Commission, and other concerned government agencies for its regular updating and appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Environment, Science, Technology, and Finance.
Senate Number 528, an act establishing the Philippine Legislative Academy, defining its powers and functions, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
Referred to the Committees on Accounts, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Senate Number 529, an act amending Commonwealth Act Number 473, otherwise known as the Revised Naturalization Law, and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committee on Justice.
Senate Number 530, an act providing for a Magna Carta for students' rights and welfare, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Basic Education and Higher Technical Vocational Education.
Senate Number 531, an act further amending Commonwealth Act Number 146, otherwise known as the Public Service Act as amended, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
Referred to the Committees on Public Services, Economic Affairs, and Finance.
Senate Number 523, an act mandating ship owners, ship crew, and concerned government agencies to provide for and ensure the safety of passengers at sea, providing penalties for violations thereof and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committee on Public Services.
Senate Number 533, an act encouraging volunteerism during emergencies by protecting volunteers from liability, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Social Justice and Justice.
Senate Number 534, an act providing for the protection of financial consumers and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Banks and Trade.
Senate Number 535, an act reducing the corporate income tax rate, amending sections 27 and 28 of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 as amended for other purposes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
Senate Number 536, an act repealing Republic Act Number 10912, otherwise known as the Continuing Professional Development Act of 2016, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committee on Civil Service.
Senate Number 537, an act classifying the sale or importation of petroleum products and raw materials in the manufacture thereof as value-added tax-exempt transactions, amending for the purpose Section 1091 of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 as amended and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committee on Ways and Means.
Senate Number 538, an act providing incentives for the manufacture, assembly, conversion, and importation of green vehicles and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Trade, Public Services, and Ways and Means.
Senate Number 539, an act exempting government officials and employees from the prohibition against disclosure of or inquiry into deposits with any banking institution, amending for the purpose certain provisions of Republic Act Number 1405, otherwise known as the Secrecy of Bank Deposits Law, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committee on Banks.
Senate Number 540, an act instituting inclusive education through the establishment of inclusive education learning resource centers for children and youth with special needs in all public schools division, providing for standards and guidelines and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Basic Education, Women, and Finance.
Senate Number 541, an act regulating electronic cigarettes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Health and Trade.
Senate Number 542, an act increasing the positions reserved for persons with disabilities, amending for the purpose Republic Act Number 7277 as amended, otherwise known as the Magna Carta for Disabled Persons, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Social Justice, Labor, and Finance.
Senate Number 543, an act establishing quality standards for mineral, carbonated, and other bottled water, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Health, Trade, and Finance.
Senate Number 544, an act creating the Metro Bataan Development Authority, defining its powers and functions, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Government Corporations, Economic Affairs, and Finance.
Senate Number 545, an act synchronizing the opening of all classes in all schools in the Philippines, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Basic Education and Higher Education.
Senate Number 546, an act prohibiting merchandising stores and service establishments from charging more than the cash retail price of goods and services purchased with credit cards and prescribing penalties for any violation thereof, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Trade, Banks, Trade and Banks.
Senate Number 547, an act establishing road safety curriculum, campaign, and training, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
Refer to the Committees on Basic Education, Public Services, and Finance.
Senate Number 548, an act to promote the production, processing, marketing, and distribution of Philippine mangoes, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Lapid.
To the Committees on Agriculture, Trade, and Finance.
Senate Number 549, an act providing the enabling mechanisms for research and development of coconut sugar in the country, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Lapid.
To the Committees on Agriculture, Science and Technology, and Finance.
Senate Number 550, an act establishing a Securities and Exchange Commission office in Coronadal City and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Senator Pacquiao.
To the Committee on Banks and Finance.
Resolutions. PS Resolution Number 67, entitled Resolution Directing the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development and other appropriate Senate committee to inquire and review in aid of legislation the policy, mandates, measures adopted, and coordination of concerned government agencies to address the influx of illegal foreign workers, especially in the Philippine offshore gaming operators, and ensure the country benefits from POGOs and related activities or services, introduced by Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Labor, Justice, and Ways and Means.
PS Resolution Number 68, resolution directing the Committee on Higher, Technical, and Vocational Education, Committee on Basic Education, Arts and Culture, and other appropriate Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the status of the implementation of Republic Act Number 10968, otherwise known as the Philippine Qualifications Framework Act, introduced by Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Higher, Technical, and Vocational Education and Basic Education, secondary, federal.
PS Resolution Number 69, resolution urging the Senate Committees on Public Services and Finance to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the reported underutilization of the budget for flood control projects by the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority, MMDA, with the end in view of efficient utilization of government's resources for urgent and important projects, introduced by Senator Revilla Jr.
To the Committees on Public Works and Finance.
PS Resolution Number 70, a resolution urging the Senate Committee on Agriculture and Food to conduct an inquiry on the status and progress of the implementation of RA 11203, or the Rice Tariffication Law, particularly with respect to its impact on rice farmers and the agricultural sector, with the end in view of crafting legislation to ensure the protection of our domestic producers and agricultural sector, introduced by Senator Antiveros.
To the Committee on Agriculture.
PS Resolution Number 71, titled Resolution Directing the Senate Committee on Youth to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the implementation of Republic Act Number 10742, or the Sangguniang Kabataan SK Reform Act of 2015, in order to determine the supplementary steps to further strengthen youth representation in the country, introduced by Senator Angara.
To the Committee on Youth and Local Government. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we have today a guest of Senator Pacquiao. We have Regional Director Naravi Dagiatan Bidea of Region 12. In our agenda today, Mr. President, we have two of our distinguished colleagues who would like to give some privileged speeches on their advocacies. May we recognize ladies first, the distinguished lady Senator of Taguig and Pateros, no other than Senator Pia Cayetano. Mr. President.
The distinguished lady from Taguig and Pateros, Senator Pia Cayetano, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I believe in the 12 years that I was in the Senate, I think without miss, I delivered a speech on breastfeeding every August. And the reason for that is because August is Breastfeeding Month. Thus, I am duty-bound to do my part in promoting breastfeeding, being the author of the expanded breastfeeding law, together with the late Senator Ed Angara. But the question that I'd like my colleagues to ponder on is this: why do we need to promote something that is so natural, that is a biological function of every mother? The reason for that is because over the decades, we have lost the breastfeeding culture, especially among mothers who work outside of the home. And there has also been a lot of misinformation on breast milk alternatives, which have resulted in sickness and death among our infants. A little bit of history, Mr. President. Obviously, women breastfed from the time of Adam and Eve. However, around the time of the Industrial Revolution, there was a major shift in the traditional woman's life. They left their homes to join the workforce, working hours and hours, half a day, and many of them living away from home. This caused the separation of the mother from their child, interfering with breastfeeding. The result was many babies fell sick and actually died. There were no studies to tell mothers what were the acceptable alternatives to breast milk. Thus led to the invention of formula milk. And for a while, this was seen as a suitable alternative to breast milk for mothers. In fact, it became very lucrative because the demand of working mothers grew, and before long, formula milk was even being touted as the best food for babies. They would say that it makes babies grow stronger, grow taller, become smarter, etc., etc. Well, over the decades, this was proven to be false. There is no formula or milk substitute that can provide the nutrients or immunological benefits that breast milk can provide. I repeat, there is no other product than the mother's milk. Anyone else who says so is lying. I am now going to take the opportunity to greet a soon-to-be young father, former Congressman Samsam Gullas, who is behind me, to remember that. Because the next part of my speech is about being a very supportive, breastfeeding husband or father. Anyway, the advertisements and commercials that were promoting formula milk led many mothers to believe that, in fact, they could give their mothers this formula milk and their babies would be healthier. The most affected always are the poorest of the poor because they had very little money to spend. They would buy formula and then they would even use it not within the prescribed manner of using. They would dilute it with more water because they didn't have the money to pay for all that formula milk, and thus their baby would even get more malnourished. And during times of disaster, Mr. President, I'll talk about this a little bit more, when formula milk was made available, without access to clean water, babies even got diarrhea and some would even die. So this led to the passage of EO 51, which regulated the promotion and advertising of breast milk substitutes. That was before I became a senator, Mr. President. Meanwhile, I became a working mother myself, and from my own research, wala pa hong internet noon, so I bought books, and I read on these books. I learned that breast milk was best for babies. I breastfed my 3 children, and indulge me, Mr. President, as I share this story. My mom, who happens to be in the audience today, she actually surprised me. I did not know that she would be here. So that's my mom over there. Ma, can you stand up? For those of you who were colleagues of my father, now you know where my brothers and I get most of our wisdom from, our mother. Anyway, my breastfeeding story. My mom was my invaluable partner in my breastfeeding journey. I lived in a 2-bedroom house in Taguig with my brother, Alan, now the Speaker of the House. I lived in one room with my husband, and he lived in his other room by himself, as far as I know. Meanwhile, because I was breastfeeding night and day, my mom would come over and sleep in our house, and she would stay in Alan's room and get my baby at any hour of the night so that I could have a little bit of sleep. And thus, Alan technically also witnessed and was a partner in my breastfeeding journey. I had a very similar experience with my second child. It was not an easy experience in both cases because I was a working mom. I had to stay up all night. I am not one of those mothers who had an oversupply of milk. I cried in the first 2 months of breastfeeding my baby. It was painful. I had no sleep. I went to work and had to budget my time carrying what looked like a briefcase, but was actually a breast pump. Come my third child, who is in the picture there on the wall. My third child was Gabriel. He was born with a cleft lip and palate, and he also had many other conditions brought about by his condition, which is called trisomy 13. Thus, he could not really suck well, and so I breastfed him through a tube that went all the way down to his stomach. So that was my breastfeeding experience. Every mother has their own story to tell. Fast forward, I became a senator, and I was approached by many advocacy groups asking for help in promoting breastfeeding. And this gave me the opportunity to work with the late Senator Ed Angara, wherein we passed the expanded breastfeeding promotion law in 2009. This law required that we set up lactation stations in the workplaces and in places frequented by women. So gentlemen, if you go with your wives to SM or other malls, please do me a favor and ensure that you see a breastfeeding center. I mentioned SM because, to be fair to SM, they even put up the lactation stations before it became a law. So yes, that is part of it. Senator Gordon pointed something out that I will actually talk about. The law also required that we require doctors and health workers to talk about it because, surprisingly, we met a lot of mothers who said their doctors never talked about breastfeeding with them. whether it was the OB-GYN or the pediatrician. I'd like to believe that since we passed this law, which has been 10 years, this has been improved. It also is required to be part of the curriculum. What we want to see is that when children read books, they see pictures of a breastfeeding family and not a family that has a baby being fed through a bottle, because we want to promote a breastfeeding culture. Now, to complement this law and to also help in ensuring its implementation, I did my little share of talking to health workers, talking to mothers, visiting hospitals, encouraging LGUs to put up milk banks. And this is where the birthday celebrant, Senator Dick Gordon, comes in. As Senator Dick Gordon is a proponent of bloodletting, I am a proponent of milkletting. It is very similar. And let me get there. He is also a proponent of breast milk promotion, because as the Red Cross chair, they require that our disaster centers are breastfeeding friendly. So for those who don't know what a milk bank is, or what a milk-letting activity is, it's similar to bloodletting, where you ask people to volunteer. In this case, these are mothers who are actually breastfeeding and have milk to share, and they pump their milk and they donate it. It will be put in storage for mothers who would be needing it for their babies in the future. Fast forward then was the maternity leave law, which we all passed just recently. And this law complements the breastfeeding laws that I mentioned, because one of the biggest deterrent to women continuing breastfeeding is the fact that they go to work and they're separated from their children. So for those gentlemen here who will have women in your workforce who will be breastfeeding, please, I encourage you, I remind you that it is the law to allow them to have time to breastfeed. Sadly, our law only provides for 40 minutes, which is actually not enough for those gentlemen. And I know Joel was a supportive breastfeeding husband, so was Sunny. I don't know the rest, but whoever else was, thank you for that. You know that 40 minutes in a workday is not enough to breastfeed, so I encourage you to be even more supportive than that. My staff who do not know that I'm about to call their attention, my Chief of Staff, DG, who disappeared, my personal assistant, Claire, they both breastfed their babies while working for me, while being in hearings. You'll even see them live in camera in the background with the breastfeeding cover over them, breastfeeding while they're working. So this is really something that we need to support. We have our 5th floor breastfeeding lactation center, and what I asked the secretariat is, like, when we first launched it, we had the tarpaulin, because when hearings start, we were very pleasantly surprised that visitors, our resource persons who would come, were happy that we have a lactation room that they can visit. So let's make them know that by putting up the proper signages so that they know that the Senate is breastfeeding friendly. And I also had the privilege, Mr. President, of setting up the same in the House of Representatives when I was there over the last 3 years. So my call to action, Mr. President, is simply that DOH ensures that all the sectors are compliant. Hospitals, health institutions, and the industries that manufacture and distribute milk formula, they follow our rules and regulations. The Department of Labor, that they ensure that the private companies are following the requirement that lactation stations are set up within their offices, and that I have women who message me on Twitter and Instagram that their boss is not giving them time off to breastfeed. So that is required by the law. So we need DOLE to step up on this. The civil service, to ensure also that our government agencies are also compliant, we should take the lead. I'd like to point out that the Senate is very small compared to the House of Representatives. When I went there, that was one of the first things that I did, to check where the lactation station is. And in a setup like that, although the law does not dictate how many meters away that lactation station should be from a woman's office, the fact that the House of Representatives is an entire complex, Mr. President, to walk from your office to the next building would already use up the few minutes you have to breastfeed. So we need employers to be mindful of this, because otherwise you do not set up the environment for successful breastfeeding. My final call to action is for the LGUs. As our colleague Senator Gordon said, breastfeeding must also be present in disaster risk situations, in evacuation stations. The picture I have there is actually my sister-in-law, Phil, who breastfed 3 of her babies. She's there to give support to the evacuation center that was set up by my brother, Mayor Lino Cayetano. And again, this is compliant with the law, and it is required that every LGU provides the support that a breastfeeding mother and family needs. So I end my privileged speech. Thank you so much for, Mr. President, to our colleagues who listened to this, for those who have been here for 12 years, for listening to me on this topic for 12 years. Thank you very much.
Yes, indeed. We confirm what Senator Pia has said. She has been delivering these speeches about breastfeeding for so many years already. As a matter of fact, there was a time that I interpolated. I
Yes,
wish
Mr.
I could
President.
interpolate now, but because of the position, I will just concur and support
Thank you.
the speech that you have just delivered. Senator Risa
Thank you, Mr.
Ontiveros.
President.
Mr. President, I believe there's a list. Two ladies,
Senator
two
Grace
lady
Poe.
senators would like to interpolate. Even the distinguished Senate President pro tempore wants to interpolate because he has great ideas. You're giving us great ideas earlier while the lady senator was giving her
Always.
speech.
Senator Ralph always has ideas.
Apparently, he's also an expert,
Senator
according to
Ralph.
the minority leader.
Senator Lapid informed me that Senator Lacson and Senator Pacquiao were also have also ideas about the matter. Senator Grace Poe is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Actually, on a serious note, I'd like to thank the senator from the gig for bringing this up again. Although most of the lady senators here can no longer benefit from the lactation room, I think it's good to encourage also the other women in the Senate to take advantage of this. And I would also like to remind our colleagues and the public that the new law that was signed by the President and that we initiated also is that all land terminals now are required to have a breastfeeding room.
Yes.
So that should also encourage it. And I think that the study on the benefits of breastfeeding is actually not a myth. I've met a lot who were breastfed as a child. Unfortunately, when I was brought to my mom, I was already probably beyond the stage that I could be breastfed. But my mom in particular was breastfed until she was 2 years old. And she's now in her golden years, but she's still, knock on wood, very strong, mentally very sharp and healthy. So I think that it manifested also. That was during the war, and so it was the most convenient,
Yes.
most affordable
Yes.
way of feeding a child. So as a woman, I think that it's good that we encourage that. And to the men out there, to also encourage their wives and their partners. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, just a quick response. The breastfeeding culture actually complements Her Honor's advocacy on feeding of the children, because if in their infant years they are breastfed properly, in fact, I would like to remind any of the LGUs who would hear this discussion that the most important thing to do during disasters and in the day-to-day in the LGU is to feed the mother, because she will then be able to breastfeed. So basically, your mother's mother was very diligent in breastfeeding your mother, and it's your grandmother we should be also commending.
Yes, and also I remember when it was my time breastfeeding,
Meron.
the best way is actually drinking malunggay
Yes.
tablets.
Yes.
That will induce more milk and
That's
capability for the mom.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Senator
Senator Poe.
Hontiveros is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of points. by way of manifesting support for the privileged speech of Senator Pia. Indeed, one of the main justifications for the expanded maternity leave law is to give more time to mothers to fully breastfeed, exclusively breastfeed in the first 6 months of life, and Senator Grace gave an example of continuous breastfeeding until at least 2 years of life. Also, I'm sure it would interest Sen Pia to know that in the Safe Spaces Act, which we also just passed, it's a qualified offense, a higher offense requiring higher penalties, a qualified offense to mock or catcall a breastfeeding mother in the act of breastfeeding her child. So this is to encourage and make natural public breastfeeding, whether here at the Senate for our younger colleagues or anywhere else in the country, Mr. President. There should be no shaming of breastfeeding mothers. So thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Pia.
Thank you. I'd also like to quickly react to the statements of Senator Hontiveros. It is true, there was a time, I think I was still in the Senate then, that an incident was reported to me where, because we passed a law putting up lactation stations in public places, a security guard accosted a mother who was breastfeeding in the mall in public. Because the understanding of the security guard is there's a lactation room, you must breastfeed there. So at that time, there was no, well, there wasn't an intention to mock, but there was a misunderstanding of the law, misinformation that woman must now only breastfeed in a lactation station. So thank you for bringing that up, because we'd like to also be sure that the breastfeeding culture does require that we allow a breastfeeding mom to breastfeed anywhere. Thank you for bringing that up.
Senator Pangilinan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may I know if the good
Of course,
Senator Cayetano would be willing to be
I'm
here
happy
for
to be reunited with you and listen to your comments or answer any questions.
Yes, welcome back. I remember your spirited defense of this measure in your first term, if I'm not or
Yes, I think we brought it, it passed in 2009, so it was still part of my first term.
Yes, yes. And I remember one of the concerns then was that you did have a huge lobby of formula milk
Yes,
advocates, or at least the industry,
the industry, distributing, manufacturing, formula milk.
donating nurseries in hospitals.
Yes. Conducting seminars for mothers.
Yes, all these has been addressed by the law, if I'm not mistaken.
The law does address it, and it's upon DOH to fully implement it. That's why my call also includes that DOH continues to be vigilant about the compliance with these regulations and laws.
It's ironic, Mr. President, that one of the major expenses of families, especially with infants, would be the formula milk.
Sadly, Mr. President, in fact, many times during the time that I was defending this law, we would put the price of milk, which was about half of a minimum wage, one can,
Yes.
and we would let the public know that sadly a lot of people are misinformed that they need to spend the money that they earn on this when a mother can provide it for free. You just basically have to feed the mother, which
Yes.
which should be included in a family's budget anyway.
Yes, yes, that is right. Because if I recall correctly, at least at that time, in 2009, the formula milk industry in the Philippines was 30 billion peso industry, if I'm not mistaken, or 40 billion.
I don't
peso.
remember the number, but it is big money, Mr. President, and they have really been spending on advertisement. And what bothered me is that there were ads that really would portray a baby as smarter, grow faster. So what mother would not be what mother would not want all that for their baby?
Yes, the irony there is that here you have an industry, 30-40 billion peso annually, when all you have to do is make sure that the mother is fed rather than
The mother is well cared for and loved by their partners.
same, yes, as well, because you cannot have stress
Yes, that's true. That affects the milk supply.
Yes, yes. I remember that because Sharon breastfed for 6 months. Our second child. She breastfed 3 months for Frankie, but she breastfed 6 months for Miel because the doctor, our pediatrician, said it's 6 months or nothing in terms of the effect on the child. And so I could not be a source of stress for 6 months.
Thank you for that.
And then I remember the first 2 weeks or the first 3 weeks was critical.
To establish your milk supply.
Yes, yes. But going back to that point, Mr. President, it's ironic that you do have an infant formula industry that runs in the billions of pesos when all you have to do is ensure that the mother has the proper nutrition and in other words,
information and support.
information and support. And between formula milk and of course mother's milk, for the child, the mother's milk would be infinitely more beneficial.
Yes, Mr. President, that is correct.
Thank you, Mr. President, and we'd like to thank the good senator for her allowing us to interpolate.
Mr. President, I'd just like to add a comment. The gentleman's statements and observation reminded me of figures that I was not able to include in my speech. My call to action to DOH is really is not, I should not be taken lightly because our data tells us that we are not exclusively, mothers are not exclusively breastfeeding their babies for the length of time that is recommended, which, as His Honor said, is 6 months. 6 months and beyond, because Senator Risa said 2 years, because the actual wording is 6 months and beyond, up to 2 years. The reason for that is they don't want mothers to feel that you should stop at 6 months. They really want you to continue. But 6 months really is vital. And our figures show that, I'll ask my staff to hand me the data because I don't have it on me, but Filipino mothers on the average are only breastfeeding for something like 42 days. So that is only a month, that's barely a month and a half, if I remember right. So we really have our barangay health workers, our municipal and city doctors really have a lot of work on hand because I don't have the data. I do not know why. Senator Risa correctly pointed out that we do know that one of the main deterrents to continuous breastfeeding is when mothers go back to work. So to give mothers 105 days at home will be a big help. But I'm also talking about the women in the barrios, in the barangays, those who have that ability to still be with their babies in some way. Why is our average only 42 days? So we need to spend time and energy to find out why this is the case, because this will drastically address the nutrition issue with our newborns, Mr. President.
All right. Any other interpolator? Majority Leader?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we refer the speech of the lady senator to the Committee on Health.
Any objection? Hearing none, the privileged speech is hereby referred to the Committee on Health.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we recognize as well Senator Emmanuel Manny Pacquiao to deliver his privileged speech.
Gentleman from Jensan in Sarangani, Mindanao, I should say. Senator Manny Pacquiao is recognized.
Sarangani and Jinsan, Mr. President.
Sarangani and Jensan, in Mindanao.
The world pa naman. Thank you, Mr. President, my fellow legislators. As I rise on a matter of personal and collective privilege on matters of public concern, I would like to express my gratitude for the opportunity to work with all of you. Our collective mission is to serve our people and protect our country. During the 17th Congress, Mr. President, I filed Senate Bill number 185, an act to impose the death penalty and increase penalties on certain heinous crimes involving dangerous drugs, amending for that purpose other special penal laws and for other purposes. On August 8, Mr. President, 2016, I delivered my first privileged speech on calling for the restoration of the death penalty. The debates on the committee level, Mr. President, did not take off because of various factors. This 18th Congress, Mr. President, I filed Senate Bill number 189, an act imposing death penalty and increased penalties on certain heinous crimes which involves manufacturing and trafficking of dangerous drugs, amending for the purpose other special penal laws and for other purposes. Mr. President, I am one with Senator Ping Lacson, Senator Bongo, and Senator Ronald De La Rosa Bato in calling for the reimposition of death penalty as expressed in the bills that we have respectively filed. Mr. President, I firmly believe that the government has been given the authority to rule over our people. As a Christian, I subscribe to what the Bible says about submission to governing authorities, Mr. President. I can cite Bible verses, Mr. President, to support my stand, but let me make this very clear, Mr. President. The focus of our debate on the reimposition of death penalty should be on the basis of its constitutionality. Let me reiterate the lines from the speech of Senator Arturo Tolentino on February 2, 1993, and I quote, "It is my purpose to discuss the question of imposing the death penalty not on general principle, not under divine law or religious dogma, not under moral or philosophical considerations, but simply and specifically in the light of the Constitution." End of quote. End of quote. Kaya ang tanong, naayon ba sa konstitusyon ang muling pagpataw ng parusang kamatayan? Mr. President, the 1987 Constitution never abolished the death penalty. Kung babalikan natin ang naging deliberasyon ng mga membro ng 1986 Constitutional Commission, malinaw ang kanilang naging consensus. Consensus, Mr. President, ipaubayat na lamang sa lehislatura ang desisyon kung pahintulutan o ipagbawal ang pagpataw ng parusang kamatayan. Our prevailing constitution reserved the imposition of the capital punishment for offenses so abhorrent to orderly society. This means after requirements of due trial and exhaustive review are complied with, death penalty may be imposed by the authority with jurisdiction on certain offenses which, based on good faith and best judgment of Congress, had qualified as heinous crimes. Thus, Section 19, Article 3 of the 1987 Constitution now reads, and I quote, "Excessive fines shall not be imposed, nor cruel, degrading, or inhuman punishment inflicted. Neither shall death penalty be imposed unless compelling reason involving heinous crimes. The Congress hereafter provides for it." End of quote. Mr. President, at this point, let us examine the meaning of the qualifier used by our forefathers, heinous. The word is taken from the old French word haine, which means hatred. Through times it was used to define things and circumstances that are abominable or totally reprehensible. Heinous, kasuklam-suklam. Section 19, Article 3 of the Constitution was crafted in such a way that the commissioners did not completely foreclose the possibility that the needs of the time may change and may warrant the imposition of the capital punishment. In our forefathers' mind, the temper and condition of the times changed. Hence, they left it to us, the elected representatives of the people in Congress, to assess our current situation and determine whether we find compelling reasons to reinstate the death penalty to protect and preserve our nation. Heinous crimes have already been defined and identified under Republic Act Number 7659, or an act to impose death penalty on certain heinous crimes, which was enacted on December 13, 1993. As provided in its whereas clause, the crimes punishable by death under this act are heinous for being grievous, odious, and hateful offenses in which, by reason of their inherent or manifest wickedness, viciousness, atrocity, and perversity, are repugnant and outrageous to the common standards and norms of decency and morality in a just, civilized, and ordered society. The same law, as amended by Republic Act 9165, Mr. President, as the Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act established that certain drug-related crimes, which include the manufacturing and trafficking of dangerous drugs, are heinous crimes. Mr. President, news report about increase of illegal drugs and crimes that were triggered by drug use are alarming, Mr. President. Walang sound.
At mga sugat sa leeg ang 71 taong gulang na itatago natin sa pangalang Pasita. Kagagawan daw ito ng 29 anyo sa si Pilmar Alvarez na nanggahasa sa lola. Kwento ng biktima, madaling araw nung linggo, pumasok ang suspek sa kanyang kubo sa Kapalong, Davao del Norte. Tinutukan daw ng suspek ng kutsilyo ang biktima, kaya hindi na nakapalag ng pagsamantalahan.
Aminadong lasing at langus sa droga ang 25 anyos sa si Beethoven Del Mar Jr. nang mahuli ng mga pulis sa Cubao kaninang
atin sa pangalang Pasita. Kagagawan daw ito ng 29 anyo sa si Pilmar Alvarez na nanggahasa sa lola. Kwento ng biktima, madaling araw nung linggo, pumasok ang suspek sa kanyang kubo sa Kapalong, Davao del Norte. Tinutukan daw ng suspek ng kutsilyo ang biktima, kaya hindi na nakapalag ng pagsamantalahan.
Aminadong lasing at langus sa droga ang 25 anyos sa si Beethoven Del Mar Jr. nang mahuli ng mga pulis sa Cubao kaninang madaling araw. Suspect si Del Mar sa panloloob at angkang panggagahasa sa isang babae.
Nato ang 20 anyos na si Felix Mariano na kombinasyon ng iligal na droga at alkohol ang pangunahing dahilan kung bakit niya nagawang gahasain ang isang minor de edad kahapon ng madaling araw. Tamayang kasi nila ngayon ang 10 buwang gulang niyang sanggol. Ito'y matapos pagkasaksakin ng kanyang asawa ang kanilang bunsong anak. Ito nakaraang Biyernes ng hapon sa loob ng kanilang bahay sa Payatas, Quezon City. Nasa trabaho daw siya nang maganap ang krimen. Arestado naman ang suspect na ina na agad din naman sumuko. Pero aminado siyang nasa impluwensya siya ng iligal na droga bago ang krimen.
Isa-isang inilabas ng mga pulis ang mga laman ng isang van na nakaparada sa isang parking lot sa Ortigas, Pasig. 26 na sako ng ephedrine ang nakuha, pati mga bote ng acetone, flask, strainer at planggana. Lahat ng ito mga sangkap at gamit para makagawa ng shabu. At ang lahat ng nasabat kagabi, maaaring gumawa ng droga na aabot sa 4 na bilyong piso ang halaga. Bukod sa mga ito, na-recover din sa sasakyan ang finished product na nagkakahalaga ng 54 million pesos. Inaresto ang Filipino-Chinese na si Marvin Yu at Koreanong si Kim Jong-hee ang sinasabing chemist sa grupo.
7 milyong pisong halaga ng shabu ang nasabat sa operasyon sa Congressional Avenue, Quezon City. Nakuha ito mula sa Nigeria na si Ifyani Chinueva at 4 na Pinoy. Sabi ng PIDEA, malakihan ang operasyon ng grupo sa Baclaran at Cavite na target ang street pushers.
Walang kawala sa mga otoridad ang isang Chinese sa ikinasang buy-bust operation ng pinagsanib na puwersa ng Southern Police District Anti-Illegal Drugs Special Operation Task Group at ng Pasay Police. Naaresto si John Gyuzu matapos makuha sa kanya ang 15 kilo ng hinihinalang high-grade shabu na nagkakahalaga ng mahigit 13 million pesos.
Sa abot ng 166 kilogram ng hinihinalang shabu na may market value na 1.1 billion pesos. Ang nasamsam ng PIDEA sa dalawang magkahiwalay na operasyon ngayong hapon. 4 na Chinese national ang nahuli sa buy-bust operation. Ayon kay PIDEA Director General Aaron Aquino, maaaring miyembro ng Golden Triangle ang mga nahuli. Ito yung sindikato ng illegal na droga na nakabase sa mainland China. Nagsagawa ng follow-up operation sa isang bahay sa loob ng Ayala Alabang Village kung saan na-recover ang higit 100 kilo at naaresto ang 19 anyos na naiwang bantay.
Sa unang tingin ay ordinaryo lang ang dalawang magnetic strap lifter na ito na dumating sa Manila International Container Port noong June 28. pero nakasirig pala sa bawat isa nito ang tig 200 at 50 kilo ng shabu na may kabuang halaga na 3.4 billion pesos.
Apat na malalaking magnetic lifter ang tumambad sa PIDEA nang pasukin nila ang isang warehouse sa Barangay F. Reyes sa General Mariano Alvarez, Cavite.
Mr. President, illegal drugs are destroying the lives of our people. The organized international drug syndicates are more aggressive than ever. We should just allow them to keep doing what they are doing, Mr. President. I think hindi natin hayaan, Mr. President, na malusutan na naman tayo ulit nitong mga drug syndicates na to magpasok ng tunila-tuniladang droga dito sa ating bansa, Mr. President. The government has put an effort to eradicate the country of shabu by dismantling shabu laboratories across the land. However, shabu manufacturers have come up with ideas to avoid getting caught, just like the floating shabu laboratories of the Chinese, Mr. President. Despite efforts of dismantling the shabu laboratories within the country, Southeast Asia, including the Philippines, has been the fastest growing shabu market in the world. In the Philippines alone, billions of worth of shabu has been confiscated in relation to the anti-drug war of the government. Despite of efforts of eradicating our country of this poison, the first quarter of 2019 has the all-time high record, Mr. President, of shabu that was seized by authorities. It is alarming to know that most of the supply of shabu in the Philippines is being facilitated by transnational drug syndicates, Mr. President. Drug trafficking is well organized. Aggressive are the international criminal organizations in drugs cartels. In fact, there are more foreign nationals than local Filipinos who audaciously smuggled illegal drugs into our borders, Mr. President. Most of these foreign nationals come from countries that impose death penalty from drugs offenses: China, Taiwan, South Korea, India, USA, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. Mr. President, in the Asian region, only the Philippines, Cambodia, and the Timor-Leste do not have death penalty for drug trafficking. Our strategic location as gateway for transnational transactions in our lenient penal system towards drug trafficking have made our country a safe place for the syndicates' highly profitable drug business. Mr. President, drug problem has two faces. First, users who are addicted to drugs. Second, the money makers, the drug lords, manufacturers, posers, protectors, are drug addict to money. Ang mga drug traffickers ay gahaman sa pera at wala silang pakialam kung masira ang kinabukasan ng kanilang mga nabibiktima. Basta ang mahalaga, dumami ang kanilang pera, more drugs, more money. It is clear that these criminal organizations and their cohorts cannot be deterred by the present war on drugs, nor can they be reformed even they are already inside the detention facilities. Mr. President, it is high time for the state to step up its game and put these criminals to death through judicial sanction. This death penalty, Mr. President, is a self-defense of the state to protect its people against the destruction of lives and properties brought by drug-related crimes that undermine the Filipinos' faith in the government ability to maintain peace and order in the country and affect our economic development and prosperity. The state, based on the right to protect as an act of self-defense for society, has the right to take away the life of an individual. In the case of people of the Philippines versus Carrillo, Mr. President, the Supreme Court said, and I quote, "When a person has proved himself to be a dangerous enemy of the society, the latter must protect itself from such enemy by taking his life in retribution for his offense and as some example and warning to others." End of quote. Mr. President, let me echo the philosophy of the late Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, which is one of my favorite president, Mr. President. He strictly implemented criminal legislation in Singapore, and I quote, "In criminal law legislation, our priority is the security and well-being of law-abiding citizens, rather the rights of the criminal to be protected from incriminating evidence." End of quote. Mr. President, we can learn a lot from Singapore. Political will to protect the law-abiding citizens and discipline were the formula of Lee Kuan Yew that brought progress to his country. Mr. President, tahanan natin ang Pilipinas. Mga kapwa ko, mga senador, responsibilidad natin ang panatilihin itong maayos, malinis at ligtas para sa bawat mamamayan. Sino man ang mga masasamang hangarin, may masamang hangarin sa ating tahanan ay dapat lamang managot. Drug syndicates are composed of exceptional criminals who cannot be reformed anymore. They are not scared of governments. They are not scared of punishments. For them, the threat of punishment is less important than the motivation of monetary gain. Hindi sila natatakot, Mr. President. Kahit ano pa yung parusa dyan, pero pagka nasampulan siguro natin, Mr. President, ng death penalty, ay I'm sure, natitiyak ako na magkakaroon sila ng takot. The primary motivation of this criminal is to make more money at the expense of the society. Dahil ba magaling sila lumusot, Mr. President? Hayaan na lang ba natin na ganun na lang sila? Lasunin ang lipunan at sirain ang ating tahanan? Mr. President, we are not giving up the war on drugs because we cannot allow the drug syndicates and the drug lords to reign over our land. This is our land, and we love our country. We love our land. This is our land, and we have the obligation to protect our people within the bounds of the supreme law of the land, our Constitution. Mr. President, I am expecting the varied reaction of our colleagues on the arguments I presented. I am anticipating the lengthy discussions and passionate debates regarding the constitutionality of the restoration of death penalty. With this, I urge the Committee on Justice and Human Rights to prioritize the committee hearings on this matter, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President.
The minority leader is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, will the gentleman from Sarangani yield the floor to a few questions?
It's my pleasure, Mr. President.
Mr. President, at the outset, let me congratulate Senator Pacquiao for once more bringing this issue on the floor. I have been present in a number of congresses in the past where this issue is hotly debated. And today, the gentleman from Sarangani, with his vast experience, now brings this again on the floor, and we thank, and the chamber owes him for giving us this opportunity to debate on this very sensitive issue. The first question, Mr. President, is, would the gentleman agree that death, when imposed, is irreversible?
Yes, Mr. President.
It is irreversible. And therefore, a death penalty, let me repeat that. Death penalty is a system worked out and imposed by judges and justices. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. President.
These are men, although of great knowledge. As human beings, they can be infallible. Fallible, I'm sorry. These judges and justices, in all their wise judgment, can be fallible. can commit mistakes.
Yes, maaari, Mr. President.
Maari pong magkamali sila. Hindi po ba?
Yes, Mr. President, but the most important thing is we have to trust our authority, which is the government.
No question. We trust our authorities. We trust Senator Pacquiao that it is in good faith that he is pushing for the death penalty. We trust our colleagues that they will decide in accordance with their conscience. But all of us are fallible. We can commit mistakes. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President?
It can happen, Mr. President.
It can happen, Mr. President.
There is no perfect in this world.
Correct. In fact, in the history of man, only one can claim infallibility. Would the gentleman know that man?
God, Mr. President.
Jesus Christ. And yet, Jesus Christ was a victim of wrongful execution. Is that correct, Mr. President?
Mr. President, it's hard to include what happened to our Lord Jesus Christ because it's purposely, Mr. President, it happened that way for the saving of lives of many, Mr. President.
I'm sorry?
For the saving of lives of many, Mr. President. Purposely, it happened that way, Mr. President.
Are you saying that the execution of Jesus Christ was a correct execution?
Perhaps what the gentleman means is that the redemption would not have been possible if Jesus did not die on the cross. This was a debate that we had with Senator Tolentino and I in 1993.
Because in the Bible says, Mr. President, Jesus said that he can command his angel to protect himself, but he didn't do that because purposely he's going there to sacrifice himself and for us to be saved.
That is the reason that
eternal life.
the saying that vox populi vox Dei is correct. Because the people wanted Barabbas to be released and not Jesus.
Yes.
Because God wanted Jesus to redeem.
And that is why we believe that Jesus Christ was wrongfully executed, Mr. President, because of the wrong vox populi, vox Dei. Anyway, Mr. President.
Proceed.
Mr. President, going to the next issue, the gentleman has asserted that it is not a question, that the imposition of the death penalty is not a question of constitutionality. Is that a correct recollection, Mr. President, of the speech?
Can you repeat, Mr. President, the question?
The gentleman from Sarangani asserted that the reimposition of the death penalty is not a constitutional issue because, in fact, the Constitution allows it. Is that a correct recollection?
Yes, Mr. President.
And therefore, the debate should be on a question of policy. Is that correct?
No, Mr. President.
Why is it not correct to debate on policy? We are here in the halls of Congress precisely to debate on policy. As correctly pointed out by the gentleman, it is not a question of constitutionality. And I associate myself with that proposition because indeed the Constitution provides that the legislature, the Congress, may provide for a death penalty in heinous crimes. And therefore, there is no question that the imposition of a death penalty is constitutional. But is it a correct policy to impose the death penalty? That is an issue addressed to Congress. And therefore, the debate should be on questions of policy, not on constitutionality. Would the gentleman agree with that?
No, Mr. President.
So what? Okay. So what will we debate on if not on
It's
policy?
already defined, Mr. President, the heinous and other compelling reason, Mr. President.
I'm sorry, I did not get the answer, Mr. President.
Other compelling reason.
Other compelling,
Compelling reason.
other compelling reasons. In other words, are there enough, the question that will be raised is, are there enough compelling reasons to reimpose the death penalty? Is that what the gentleman suggests?
Mr. President, drugs is considered as a heinous, Mr. President, and that's why we're here to debate on that matter for if the drugs is heinous or not. But
Yes, whether the drug is heinous or not.
that's why in the committee we have a discussion for on that matter, and we should be brought that in discussion on a committee level, Mr. President, the hearing.
Mr. President, when we craft a law, are we not establishing policy?
Yes, Mr. President, we establish policy based on the Constitution.
Well, the Constitution, Mr. President, allows the imposition of the death penalty if Congress so provides. And therefore, it is not an issue of constitutionality, but an issue of whether Congress, in its judgment, adopts the principle that imposition of the death penalty is the correct policy. Is that correct, Mr. President?
That's correct, Mr. President.
And therefore, we will be debating on policy, not on constitutionality.
Within the scope of the constitutional definition, Mr. President, we will make we'll make policy based on we are discussing here under the Constitution, based on the Constitution, and we make policy based on the Constitution, Mr. President.
That's correct. A policy cannot be contrary to the Constitution. The
Yes, Mr.
imposition
President.
of the death penalty is not contrary to the Constitution. But whether we impose the death penalty is a matter that the Constitution dictates will be left for Congress to determine. Isn't that correct, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President, that's why we're here to discuss it about
That's correct. We are here to discuss the policy of the imposition of a death penalty. Now, Mr. President, is the gentleman aware that the imposition of the capital punishment of death or capital punishment is automatically elevated to the Supreme Court for review?
Yes, Mr. President.
Now, the imposition of a death penalty is automatically subjected to review by the Supreme Court. Would this gentleman agree with that?
Yes, Mr. President.
Mr. President, would the gentleman know how many death penalties were imposed when the death penalty law was in effect? First, before that, would the gentleman spread into the record when the death penalty was effective in our jurisdiction after the 1987?
Mr. President, we can submit the complete data, Mr. President, but
Sorry?
we don't have right now.
Sorry?
We don't have data right now here.
You do not have the data.
We're going to submit the.
You do not have the data on the number of, I'm sorry. First, you are not aware when the death penalty was reimposed.
Ninth Congress,
Can you repeat the question, Mr. President?
when it was, the gentleman from Iloilo is asking when the death penalty was reimposed. That is when the law was passed.
Yes,
And that was during the 9th Congress.
yes. Would the gentleman know the month or the year that it was passed? And I'm asking this question because there are certain...
The Constitution, Mr. President, was passed on 1987 Constitution.
That
So
was
he's
the Constitution. Yes, the Constitution was passed was ratified in 1987. In fact, the Constitution prohibited the death penalty unless Congress provides otherwise. And
Unless for
Congress,
compelling reason involving heinous crimes, Mr.
that's
President.
correct. And the Constitution says so. So, just on for the record, when did Congress determine that it is an appropriate policy to reimpose the death penalty?
1993, Mr. President, Republic Act,
1993. That's
Republic
correct.
Act 7659.
Yes, that's correct. June of, I'm sorry, 1993, when the Congress enacted the law which imposed the death penalty. And subsequently, it was, the imposition of the death penalty was again suspended by an act of Congress. Would the gentleman spread into the record when that was? When that was suspended?
13th Congress.
2006, Mr. President, Republic Act 9346.
Was that?
The penalty was suspended.
Okay, yes. Now, would the gentleman know how many cases were reviewed by the Supreme Court where the death penalty was imposed?
Yun ang walang data.
Right now, Mr. President, we don't have the exact number or count. We just gathering.
Yes, I would strongly suggest that when this bill comes up for debate, data of this nature should be readily available so that our colleagues can make a rational decision as to whether to adopt the policy of reimposing the death penalty. All right, but having said that...
As you requested, Mr. President.
Yes. Mr. President, in the research of the gentleman from Sarangani of the death penalty, did he come across the case of People versus Efren Mateo E. Garcia, which dealt on the death penalty?
No, Mr. President.
No, you did not. You did not come across this case. And in this case, were you aware that the Supreme Court, in its decision, stated the number of cases that were elevated to them? Let me read to you the pertinent paragraph, since you did not come across this. But I would suggest you research on it, because we will raise this again when the bill is brought on the floor. Let me read to you, Mr. President, and spread it to the record, excerpts from the decision of the Supreme Court. I quote, according to the Supreme Court, statistics would disclose that within the 11-year period since the reimposition of the death penalty in 1993 until June of 2004, the trial courts imposed capital punishment in approximately 1,493, out of which 907 cases have been passed upon in review by the court. In the Supreme Court, where the staggering numbers find their way on automatic review, the penalty was affirmed in only 230 cases, comprising 25.36% of the total number. And let me skip the other sentences. The cases where the judgment of death has been modified or vacated consists of an astounding 71.77% of the total death penalty cases directly elevated before the court on automatic review that translates to a total of 651 out of 907 appellants saved from lethal injection. So this, end of quote. In other words, Mr. President, if there was no appeal process, almost 72% of those convicted would have died for a wrongful death or wrongful sentence, because in almost 72% of the cases reviewed by the court during the period 1993 only until 2004, 71.77% of the death penalty imposed were vacated or reversed by the Supreme Court. That's a staggering number, Mr. President. May I have the comment of the gentleman on this staggering statistic?
That's why, Mr. President, we have automatic review of the Supreme Court.
We have an automatic review of the Supreme Court. And there was this automatic review post the saving from the death chamber hundreds of people who were wrongfully convicted in the first place. Would you agree with that?
Yes, Mr. President.
Now, is it possible that in the 230 cases where the death penalty was allowed, there could also have been some errors, since the Supreme Court justices are fallible also?
That's speculative, Mr. President.
That's speculative. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, Mr. President.
Now, it is speculative, but the speculation can include wrongful execution, since we are just speculating. Would you agree with that, Mr. President?
I think, Mr. President, that is your opinion.
No,
that is your view of.
We established earlier that through the responses of the gentleman, he agrees that man is fallible and can commit errors. No one is perfect. And I'm saying that even the Supreme Court justice, among us lawyers, we know that the Supreme Court can commit errors, except that the Supreme Court, and therefore the errors that they commit are supreme in nature.
I just want to read this line, Mr. President. When the death penalty upheld, it will be subject to an automatic review by the Supreme Court, subject to the concurrence of all justices.
Yes.
All justices, Mr. President, not only three.
So are you saying that all the 15 justices cannot commit an error?
That is part of the review, Mr. President.
We would request an answer.
I mean,
is the gentleman saying?
I think what we need here is to give trust and confidence with their capability in our, especially to our judiciary, Mr. President.
We again put the question on the gentleman. Is he saying that the justices of the Supreme Court are infallible?
Mr. President, like I said, we all commit mistake, and it's not everyone's perfect, but
yes.
We always we have trust and confidence with all the justices in the Supreme Court, Mr. President.
We can commit mistakes, as you said, Mr. President. As the gentleman said, we can commit mistakes. And if you commit a mistake and impose the death penalty, that becomes irrevocable. I think that's a clear conclusion that we can have, as the gentleman has agreed, that no one is perfect. And in this imperfect world, death can be imposed, and that imposition of the death penalty is irrevocable because you cannot bring back the life of the gentleman.
I think, Mr. President, the point here is...
Mr. President, in fact, any new evidence, okay, Mr. President, suppose, you know, in the criminology science today, there is a DNA test that is now feasible to determine identities. Now, where we have read of situations where the DNA test would show that the innocence of an accused. Would you agree with that, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President, speculative,
Yes.
Mr. President.
In fact, there were, I think we can cite a few examples where because of a DNA test, a judgment was reversed. Would you agree with that there are such,
Yes,
there
Mr.
are such
President,
cases?
yes.
Huh? Mr. President?
It can happen, Mr. President.
It can happen, all right. Now, suppose after the death penalty is carried out, a DNA test would show the innocence of the accused meted the death penalty. Can the case be reopened and the judgment reversed?
Mr. President, the most important here is we have to trust our judiciary, especially ourselves. We have to trust ourselves. Kailangan magtiwala tayo sa sarili natin, especially sa ating
Tama po
gobyerno.
yan. Dapat magtiwala tayo, but even in evidence, even in law, in the practice of law, evidence such as DNA is given superior treatment because a DNA, for example, cannot be erroneous. On the other hand, a judgment of a human being can be erroneous, and the gentleman has agreed to that proposition earlier. It is for that reason that we are really, that we take a position that we are not agreeable to the imposition of the death penalty, because once death is carried out, it is irreversible. Even if we have new evidence discovered after the penalty is carried out, you cannot reverse anymore the execution. Pag nagkamali ka nga, nilibing yung nagkamali ang juez.
I think, Mr. President, yung mahuli ka.
Nilibing na yung nakasakdal. So it is that's the first reason why we believe that the death penalty should not be reimposed, because nobody is perfect, as the gentleman has agreed. So, okay. Is it, we go to the next topic. I have about...
Before you leave the topic,
Yes.
Your Honors, most of the propositions and the manifestation of the minority leader are correct, absolutely correct, for common crimes. For common crimes. But not for high-level drug trafficking. They can never be wrong. If it's a drug lord, you cannot be wrong.
Well,
And that is the proposal that I am proposing, not the common crimes. Forget about that. It's the high-level drug trafficking only. You will not have thousands being meted the death penalty. You will probably have in 1 year 1 or 2 maximum.
Only the drug lords,
Mr. President, Mr. President, with
Yes.
all due respect, our premise is the agreement of the sponsor that no one can claim infallibility, that no one can claim that they are perfect, no one can claim that all judgments are absolutely correct, so that where a judgment which imposed a death penalty is carried out, it becomes irreversible. That's all our point, Mr. President.
Yes, as I said, you're absolutely right. But I think my proposal will be on a different page.
Yes.
Anyway, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I think the most important thing here is we have to give trust 100% to the judiciary system, Mr. President. In that way, siguro mawawala yung kumbaga kailangan natin pagkatiwalaan ang ating gobyerno, ang ating sarili, especially sa gobyerno tayo. Pagkatiwalaan natin yung sarili natin, especially yung judiciary natin, yun ang importante kasi kung hindi tayo magtiwala sa gobyerno, especially sa judiciary natin, walang mangyayari sa bansa natin. That's
May
absolutely.
tiwala po tayo sa lahat. May tiwala po tayo sa justices. Ngunit ang problema natin ay ang ginawa ng tao, pwede rin may pagkakamali. Nobody is perfect, the gentleman has agreed. And therefore, we are working in an imperfect system which is imposing a perfect end to life or imperfect end to life. And if the death penalty is imposed and there is reason to believe or there is evidence that subsequently surfaces that indeed there was an error,
Mr.
the
President.
error is irreversible.
Mr. President, I respect your viewpoint of this discussion, Mr. President. But the thing is, Mr. President, even in the Bible, God given given authority, the authority to impose capital punishment. Permission, the authority to impose capital punishment. To discipline the wrongdoers, Mr. President.
And nagkamali nga doon sa penalty kay Jesucristo.
That's authorized, Mr. President. Giving authority the government to impose capital punishment, which is
even if it is wrongful, and I do not accept that, Mr. President. Even if it is wrongful, the theory of the good gentleman is that the government is given that authority. We are here to debate as to whether that authority should be given precisely because of the pitfalls of that policy. Anyway, Mr. President, we will debate on that again when the bill is presented and sponsored, and I hope the gentleman will sponsor it again so that we can have a continuity in this debate.
Yes, Mr. President, after the committee hearing, then we will discuss again here in the floor.
Unfortunately, I will be the one sponsoring it.
Sorry?
I will be the one sponsoring it and not Senator Pacquiao.
He's volunteering, Mr.
bill.
President, to sponsor it. So
No, it's my bill. My bill is for high-level drug trafficking only.
Okay, yes.
I think that is
Yes, Mr.
that will be the
President.
committee report.
we will debate on that when the time
Yes.
comes.
Thank you very much. But the majority leader, before the referral, may I be given a chance to seek the floor? Perhaps after Senator Hontiveros, she is asking for the floor. Then
Yes,
may I? Session suspended. Si Ralph, pakitawag mo.
Mag-interpolate.
Manong Dick, you want to sit down there first? You need
Alam mo, ihi na ako ba? Kanina ko pa sana, i-suspend ko pa sana.
sentado nun eh.
Session is resumed. Senator Dillon. I have the floor, Mr. President.
Yes, Senator Dillon is recognized.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. The good Senate President during the break has indicated that he also would like first to have the interpellation on Senator Pacquiao suspended. He would want to deliver a privileged speech, and so that when the matter is referred to the appropriate committee, the privileged speech of the good Senate President will be included in that referral. On that premise, Mr. President, we suspend in the meantime our interpellation to give way to the Senate President, if that is acceptable to the one who originally had the floor, Senator Pacquiao.
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. We wish to thank the gentleman from Iloilo. We could probably consider this as an interjection because it's related to illegal drugs and not a separate privilege speech, because precisely the reason I came down was, and I wanted to participate, was to be able to place into the records other points related to what the two gentlemen were talking about, and not specifically directly on the issue of death penalty, but directly on the issue of illegal drugs. And this might be forgotten when they take it up in the committee where the privilege speech will be referred. So before it is referred, again, I mentioned earlier that I have indeed a different proposal. But on the issue of illegal drugs itself, and that is one of the major points of the distinguished gentleman from Sarangani and General Santos, we are forgetting some other very important concerns that the Committee on Justice, if it is referred there, and the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, who I hope will be the secondary referral, should consider. So, again, as an interjection, thank you, Senator Dillon, Senator Pacquiao. And you may react thereafter if you may want to. The government somehow really is quite successful when it comes to the issue of enforcement of the Republic Act 9165, the Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002, of which I am the principal author of. As far as arrests and confiscations are concerned, indeed, you will see that it is quite successful. But when it comes to prosecution, and this is a point by the minority leader, when it comes to prosecution, we have there is much to be desired. In the last so many years, I think in the last 6 to 8 years, the conviction on dangerous drugs cases was less than 15%. 85% dismissal. That is how bad that prosecution is as far as the issue of illegal drugs is concerned. And I don't blame Senator Dillon for thinking that there will be a problem with the judiciary if we then talk about the issue of the death penalty. But also, aside from the fact that we are quite successful for enforcement, prosecution, there is much to be desired. There is dismal performance. They are trying their best now, so we agree. But the big question, and the people have always been asking, even media has always been asking, why does it continue? Ang daming huli, ang daming naaresto, may lumalaban, may napapatay, ang daming nakukumpiska. Bakit pa ulit-ulit? Bakit tuloy pa rin? The big answer, Mr. President, is our demand reduction strategy program is bad. There is none. And that is the big issue. We won't need the death penalty. We won't need these laws if our demand reduction strategy is very successful. How do we do that? We stop the young boys or young boys and girls from 12 years old to 13 years old from trying the illegal drugs already. And therefore, what do? We put a drug abuse resistance education program in grade 6 and grade 7 so that they would know already that it's bad. They will not try it anymore. And for those who are dependent already, then a massive rehabilitation program should be undertaken by government so that we remove them from the streets, we remove them from everywhere, and get them back into society thereafter to be productive once again. Because the bottom line, Mr. President, the day we stop buying is the day they stop selling. That is the reason there is no store in the Philippines that sells mink coats. Because no one will buy. So even if you place kilos of marijuana, kilos of shabu in any place, if no one wants to buy it or use it, it is trash. And that is what we hope that can be addressed by the committees that will take up the privileged speech of Senator Pacquiao and the interpellations of the minority leader. Hopefully, the committees can also concentrate on the issue of demand reduction program of government. And therefore, we might just be able to focus on the issue of death penalty, as I said, only for high-level drug trafficking. I thank you, Mr. President, and I hope I get reaction from the two gentlemen who have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, we listened with much interest on the manifestation of the good Senate President. It only confirms the fact that killing, whether judicial or extrajudicial, is not the solution to our drug problem. I repeat, Mr. President, the Senate President has put it very rationally. Let us reduce the demand. Let us reduce the demand. Let us, unsaid, Mr. President, is, he did not say this, but when he said reduction of the demand is the solution, in effect, without saying it, killing the users or the pushers is not the solution, except probably where it is a high-value offender. So, Mr. President, I congratulate the Senate President for that manifestation. We agree with him, let's say, 70%. Thank you, Mr. President, and if I still have the floor and we are willing to continue with the interpellation, unless the majority leader has a very important motion, the motion to...
I was supposed to like to also ask a few questions to the good gentleman from Sarangani.
Yeah, okay, I will.
Yes,
I can yield the floor in the meantime.
oh, that's right. We also have the lady senator from Akbayan. So, if with the permission of the good
Yes,
gentleman
please,
from Iloilo, thank you. Would they be recognize Senator Risa Ontiveros, Mr. President?
Senator Risa is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good colleague from Sarangani and General Santos, pwede po bang magtanong ng ilang mga tanong?
Okay, thank you.
Salamat po. Mr. President, It is your contention that only big-time drug pushers and syndicates would be imposed the death penalty. Tama po ba?
Yes, Mr. President. Yung mga malalaki ang paparusahan natin ng kamatayan sa batas na gusto nating ipasa.
Thank you, Mr. President. However, kahit ganyan po yung contention ng good sponsor, may I please call your attention to Section 7 of your bill, which amends Section 16 and imposes the penalty of death on any person who plants or cultures marijuana, opium, or any plant regardless of penalty, which may be classified as a dangerous drug or as a source from which any dangerous drug can be manufactured or derived regardless of quantity. Regardless of quantity, Mr. President, ibig sabihin po kung isang maliit na halaman o kahit isang butil, isang seed, bitay na agad, Mr.
No,
President.
Mr. President, we just put that in the bill, but we will, for discussion, Mr. President, lilinisin natin yan and then mag-come up doon sa major drug traffickers, Mr. President, yung mga malalaki.
Gaya ng sinabi po ng aking minority leader, Mr. President, good sponsor, I'm happy 70% tungkol dun sa sagot ng good sponsor. Pero siguro that will just make our work a little less difficult na ipakumbinse sa karamihan ng mga kasama natin dito sa Senado kung bakit hindi natin dapat i-reimpose yung death penalty. At this point, good sponsor, going to another issue na nabanggit kanina, earlier part of the interpellation, tungkol po sa Vox Populi, Vox Dei. Alam niyo po ba, good sponsor, Mr. President, na ayon sa recent, October 2018 survey, most recent survey ng Social Weather Station tungkol sa drug-related crimes, lumabas po na the majority, 53 to 78% of Filipinos prefer imprisonment over the death penalty kahit po sa drug-related crimes. Sabi po nitong up to 78% ng mga respondents, criminals should be sentenced to either 20 years, 40 years imprisonment, or life for the following crimes. Kasama po yung importation of illegal drugs, maintenance of drug dens, manufacture of illegal drugs, murder under the influence of drugs, sale of illegal drugs, working in drug dens, rape under the influence of drugs. Kahit po sa 7 crimes na ito, yung strongest demand for death penalty ay rape, pero to the percentage of 47%. Yung overall na finding po nitong survey na ito ay yung majority, nagpe-prefer pa rin tayong mga Pilipino na long or lifetime imprisonment para sa drug-related crime. So ito po yung kumbaga Vox Populi sa issue pong ito, Mr. President, good sponsor. So pwede po bang mag-hold pa rin yung prinsipyo nating Vox Populi, Vox Dei, and therefore, hindi po dapat i-reimpose ang death penalty kahit sa drug-related crimes, Mr. President?
Mr. President, I just want to clarify this. Ang gusto natin is yung masintensyahan ng parusang kamatayan is yung mga drug traffickers, Mr. President, yung mga gumagawa talaga ng nagmamanufacture ng shabu, which is we're talking about hundreds of kilos of shabu, high-level traffickers, Mr. President. Hindi tayo nagano dito sa mga users o mga small-time posers, kundi yung mga talagang malalaking dandaang kilo ang dinadalang shabu.
Gayun pa man, Mr. President, good sponsor, yung mga krimen ng mga big-time na drug personalities na yan, sako pa rin itong findings ng Social Weather Station na paniniwala ng karamihan ng mga Pilipino na dapat patawan ng mahabang prison sentence, hindi drug hindi death penalty. So, yung importation of illegal drugs, ginagawa ng mga big-time drug personalities, manufacture of illegal drugs, ginagawa nila, maintenance of drug dens, ginagawa nila, and certainly sale of illegal drugs, ginagawa nila. Nasa ilalim po ng survey findings na ito, kumbaga Vox Populi, na majority, 53 to 78% ng mga Pilipino ay nagsabing hindi parusang kamatayan, kundi mahabang sentensya or life imprisonment. As a last question, good sponsor, Mr. President, at this point in time, hindi pala tanong, Mr. President, pero sa pagsasara lang nitong maikling panimulang interpellation sa good sponsor, bago natin dinigin yung mga bills na to sa committee hearing, isa pong maikling manifestation, Mr. President. Please allow me to be clear. Galit ako sa drug lords. Galit ako sa droga na sumisira sa buhay ng kabataan. At the same time, Mr. President, I can't ignore evidence, dahil evidence po yung pinag-uusapan natin, I can't ignore evidence that militate against the death penalty. The statistics are jarring. Isa na po yung pinaresent ni Minority Leader kanina, na 72% ng kabuoang ni-review ng Supreme Court na death sentences na ipinataw, 72% ay napag-alamang erroneous pala, miscarriage of justice. Inosente pala yung pinatawan ng parusang bitay. What more under a climate that stigmatizes drug use and demonizes drug users? Would the Supreme Court be as decisive in reversing these decisions? Kahit pa po, at ito pinag-uusapan namin ng good sponsor kanina, kahit limitahan ang parusang kamatayan sa mga drug lords, kahit pa sa mga mandarambong, walang katiyakan na matutugunan nito ang problema sa droga at pagnanakaw sa kaban ng bayan. Kahit si Senate President kanina ay nagsabing o nagbat para sa isang malakas na drug abuse prevention at saka drug abuse rehabilitation program. Yan yung mas epektibong approach talaga, Mr. President. O walang mahirap na drug lord, pero hanggang baluktot at panig sa mayayaman at makapangyarihan ng ating sistema, patuloy, Mr. President, makakalusot ang malalaking isda. The sustainable solution lies in reforming our overall justice and criminal system to ensure that the law will be applied swiftly and evenly and ensure that the rights of every individual are protected. The real deterrent to crime, Mr. President, is not death penalty, but the certainty that drug lords and plunderers will be arrested, prosecuted, and punished. Kung may nagkasala, dapat may pantay na parusa, mahirap man o mayaman. In closing, Mr. President, to this brief initial interpellation, kasama po ng good sponsor, yung basic na prinsipyo lang na the effectiveness of the law is determined not by its harshness or ruthlessness, tulad ng ipinapakita ng statistics mismo ng Supreme Court, the effectivity of the law is determined by its sureness, its certainty, Mr. President. Salamat, Mr. President, at salamat sa good sponsor, at naglulook forward po ako sa patuloy na masiglang debate hanggang sa committee hearing.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr.
And
President.
before I end, Mr. President, let's give Mr. President, what we heard and learned, kailangan natin ng pagtitiwala sa batas natin ngayon in this time na talagang ang bansa natin ay nahihirapan pagdating dito sa illegal na droga, nahihirapan dahil talamak talaga ang droga dito sa bansa natin. Kailangan siguro natin na kailangan talaga natin magtiwala sa ating gobyerno, sa ating saligang batas, sa mga nagpapatupad. Kasi kung hindi, walang mangyayari sa bansa natin, walang mangyayari dito sa lipunan natin. Kung wala naman lang tayong tiwala sa batas natin, hindi gagawa na lang din tayo ng sarili nating paniniwala para hindi na tayo maniniwala sa batas. Kaya yun ang kailangan po natin na I'm excited for this discussion in the committee hearing. Pagkatapos dito, ma-refer sa committee, and then more discussion about this. Kasi hindi naman, we are talking about users. High level of, we are talking about high level drug traffickers, Mr. President, and talking about hundreds of kilos of shabu na ginagawa o bilyon ang halaga, daan-daang milyon ang halaga ng shabu na ginagawa nila. So sa tingin ko lang is, I'm just giving this an example, Mr. President. Ang mga Pilipino, hindi sa matigas ang ulo, hindi marunong sumunod ng batas. Kasi I'm sure halos karamihan dito nakapunta na ng abroad. Nakapunta na ng ibang bansa. Pag pumunta tayo sa ibang bansa, pag pumunta tayo ng ibang bansa, bawal magdura dyan, bawal magtapon ng basura dyan. Hindi tayo nagtatapon ng basura, hindi tayo nagtatapon ng balat ng kindi because nagrespeto tayo sa kanilang batas, sa kanilang law. Ang dito lang talaga sa atin, kailangan talaga ipaalam sa tao, itatak sa isipan ng tao na marunong sila rumispeto sa saligang batas natin. Marunong sila rumispeto sa rules and regulation, sa lahat ng mga nagpapatupad ng batas natin. Kasi pagdating sa ibang bansa, marunong naman pala yung Pilipino sumunod ng batas eh. Bakit hindi nagagawa sa Pilipinas? Okay? Nandiyan pa, especially, nasa sarili natin, sa bawat isa natin ang pagdisiplina. Kaya, importante, sa tingin ko, napakahalaga itong day penalty for high level of drug traffickers dahil karamihan sa kanila hindi taga rito sa bansa natin. Karamihan sa kanila taga ibang bansa at wala silang takot na pumasok dito sa ating bansa para maglako ng droga dahil walang day penalty, wala tayong karamihan sa atin karamihan sa kanila ay hindi mga Pilipino. So yun ang ano ko na hindi tayo kung walang supply, walang gagamit ng droga. So ganun sana ang gusto nating gawin. Ang gusto nating gawin dito sa bansa natin na pag pumunta tayo sa ibang bansa, ang Pilipino, ang bait-bait, ang marunong, bawal tumawid. Maghintay muna na mag-green para magtawid. Hindi magtawid pag pula. Pag dito sa atin, kahit pula, tawid. Wala tayong respeto sa batas natin, sa government natin, sa authority natin. We should learn how to respect. And then, turo natin yan sa ating sa mga anak natin, ituro natin sa ating mga mahal sa buhay na marunong tayo masumunod sa batas natin. Kung hindi, wala mangyayari kung wala tayong respeto at wala tayong tiwala sa ating gobyerno. So, thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, with my good kumpare, allow me to ask just a couple of questions.
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the onset, Mr. President, I'd like to congratulate Senator Pacquiao in bringing up such a very controversial measure or topic to the plenary. As we would like to already discuss the merits of the reimposition or the continuous ban on the death penalty. Mr. President, I congratulate him for his courage in pushing for his advocacy. But on particular points, Mr. President, particularly on the dapat umasa po tayo sa ating judicial system. Una, on the onset also, I'd like to say that I am anti-drugs. I am the author of the Dangerous Drugs Law. My counterpart in the Senate was Senator Bobby Barbers together with Senator Tito Soto. And my counterpart in the House was Congressman Cuenca. Congressman Cuenco and Congressman Ablan, and we fought for the Dangerous Drugs Law as a principal author. Mr. President, so I am against drugs. I lost my uncle due to drugs. He was a drug addict and he committed suicide. I lost my cousin the same way, and so masakit sa amin. Galit talaga kami sa droga. It falls close to the heart of this representative. But Mr. President, the problem also there is the mention of our good compadre from Sarangani, my fellow Mindanaoan, that we should put trust in the prosecution and the justice system. Today, Mr. President, I read in the newspaper the issue on WellMed. Ito yung mga fake, yung PhilHealth, they were fake dialysis patients na mga patay na, kung sino-sino pa, charge nila sa PhilHealth, na-dismiss yung kaso. Dahil nga po, mistrial or wrong jurisdiction. In other words, pumalpak yung prosecution service. Galit na nga si Presidente dyan. The President himself, minura-mura niya yung nangyari sa PhilHealth. That was his example, that well-made. And yet, the audacity of the judge and the prosecution to just fumble the case. And now, wala na. They are now free to go. Parang wala nangyari. So, it's very difficult, napakahirap umasa minsan sa judicial system sa mga makikita natin mga kaso na ganun, nabubulilyaso dahil sa whatever it may be, no? Na nangyayari dun sa prosecution. So, would the good gentleman from Sarangani agree with me na medyo malayo pa tayo pagdating sa prosecution and criminal justice system natin na maging perfect siya. Medyo may mga kapalpakan pa rin. As case in point, well met, this morning, I couldn't believe my eyes. Na ang presidente mismo, galit na galit dun sa kanila, ay nakalusot pa sa korte.
Mr. President, for correction na may yung cases na yun, Mr. President, hindi naman inaccurate, kundi mali lang po yung pag-file nila. They file in RTC na supposedly will file in MTC.
Correct. Pero ang punto ko dyan, yung nag-file ng case, incompetent. O short, sa Tagalog, bobo. Palpak. Pwede, siguro. Hindi natin alam. I can guess or maybe I can come up with my on my mind many reasons, no? Millions of reasons why that could happen. In other words, may konting kapalpakan pa rin ang prosecution service natin. That's all I mean. Whether it's this case or other cases, to my dear compadre, minsan pumapalpak din po sila. Would you agree?
Pero at least, Mr. President, na itama ng konti yung mali. Kaya
hindi naman. Katulad na sinabi ng Supreme Court, 72% ng mga kaso mali. At reverse nila, 50% ay inacquit. So, ang akin na naman, I'll just debate on this, Mr. President, when the right time comes, when we already have the bill in the floor. But, Mr. President, let's discuss quickly on the deterrence. On the deterrence of the death penalty. Is the good gentleman from Sarangani aware that in the United States, there have been a series of mass murders involving white supremacists, ito yung mga white nationalist supremacists, at kung saan ang napatay na itong linggo lamang ay umabot na sobra 40 na Amerikano, at nung isang linggo ay umabot yata ng 10. At meron po silang death penalty doon. At marami na pong nahatulan na death penalty on these mass murderers. Pero it is now increasing on a weekly basis sa Amerika po. Meron po kayong kasagutan, bakit kaya hindi sila natatakot na ma-death penalty na meron naman pong death penalty na established na po sa Estados Unidos? So much so, Mr. President, si President Trump mismo ang nagsabi that I ask all the justices or judges who will handle this case to impose the death penalty at the soonest possible time on these individuals. Shortly thereafter, nagkaroon ulit ng patayan. Hindi natakot. Yun ang medyo katanungan na nasa loob ng utak ko na yun at pinag-iisipan ko pa, Mr. President, na bakit nga hindi sila natatakot na may death penalty na dun sa Amerika?
I think, Mr. President, hindi nalaman ng mga tao yung pag-impose ng death penalty. Hindi nila nakikita. Pero kung makikita siguro nila na may nakikita sila na death penalty, I'm sure takot naman yan sila. Kasi doon, hindi nila nalalaman na may pinatay na pala, may nasintensya na ng death penalty. So, kaya siguro ganun. Pero kung bawat death penalty na dahil sa kasalanan, public ipaalam sa mga tao, sa media, siguro naman lahat malalaman nila na sa isipan nila, may death penalty.
Actually,
bawal
Mr.
gagawin.
President, with due respect to my distinguished compadre from Mindanao, alam po ng taong bayan sa Amerika na may death penalty. So much so na ginagawa po yung pelikula. I've seen so many movies of Tom Cruise, of Shawshank Redemption, marami dyan, The Green Mile. Ang dami po mga pelikula about the death penalty. Alam po ng mga Amerikano yan. And yet, dumami po ang mass murderers, mass killings, at krimen sa mga iba't ibang parte ng Estados Unidos, as seen in the last 2 weeks. Kaya po medyo, ang tanong po is it really a deterrence, Mr. President? I don't wish to debate any longer. Birthday po ni Senator Gordo na yon, and I'm sure gutom na po yung aking kumpadre. But yun lang, it just a thought in our minds. Is it really a deterrence? Because in some countries where they have the death penalty, it seems that there's still a proliferation of drugs, like Thailand and many other countries. Hindi po, Indonesia, they only crack down. May death penalty sila, pero ngayon lang po sila nag-crack down like Philippine style. But it hasn't stopped. They already continued prosecuting and how do you say, giving the death penalty to several individuals. But it continues, Mr. President, in this area. So, I hope and pray, Mr. President, that my colleagues can prove to us that it is truly a deterrence. Because yung sinabi po ng ating kumpadre, my dear friend from Mindanao, that tayo ay mabait pag bumibisita tayo sa ibang bansa dahil natatakot po tayo mahuli doon ng polis. Sa totoo lang. It's not really because of the death penalty. Pag pumunta ako Singapore, hindi po ako nag-deliter. Pag nag-liter po yung anak ko, ako mismo pupulot dahil alam ko, mapafine po ako ng 1,000 Singapore dollars at mapaparusahan ng law enforcement. I think what is important is that we support the men and women of the police, the PNP, the uniformed men and women, give them the best equipment, give them the best firearms, give them the best mobility, and they will do their job at the best of their ability. I think together, coupled with the good Senate President's plan to really reduce the consumption of drugs. Now, there has to be, as mentioned by my dear colleague si Risa, there's a community-based method of rehabilitation. Bukid nun, we built the biggest rehab center. Puno na yun. So they're training there, nag-rehab na yung mga drug users. So siguro yan ang isa sa mga dapat tutukan natin. And I am all for the prosecution and the arrest of this gentleman. As a matter of fact, I came up with a bill last Congress, and I'm not sure if, I think I'll file it again, kung saan, Mr. President, siguro, pabor dito si Senator Pacquiao sa akin, na gumawa tayo ng maximum prison, yung maximum, sa Amerika, ano ba yan, yung...
Alcatraz.
Parang Alcatraz. Oo, parang Alcatraz. Malayo sa cell signal. Tapos, naka-isolation yung mga hardened criminals para hindi sila makaplano. At talagang one per room, kasilyas, may kama. At yan ang ipasok natin. Sa tingin ko, mas matatakot pa yun. Kasi kung ako yung kriminal, pag pumunta ka sa Muntinlupa, dati yun. Pag upo ni Bato dun, I'm sure it was a hell for the inmates. But prior to his assumption as the pambansang security guard, it was a what you call this, country club. Before the assumption of President Digong, our Tatay Digong, and you were Chief PNP, the Muntinlupa was a country club of sorts. Pero pag nilagay po natin yan sa isang penitentiary na alam mo, walang signal, in isolation, itong hardened criminals na talagang heinous, they were guilty of heinous crimes. Sa tingin ko, mas malaking deterrent yan. Wala kang kausap. Naalala niyo yung Boys and Paint? Yung Boys and Paint commercial? Kausap niya yung ibon, tapos namuti na lang yung kamay niya, tumanda na yung in isolation. I think for me, that's a bigger deterrent. But, the beauty of that is, if he was wrongfully accused, and he sought appeal from the Supreme Court, he'll still be alive 15 years after acquitted. But if he was wrongfully accused and executed, goodbye Philippines na talaga. Wala na siyang magagawa. So, yun na lang punto ko, Mr. President, and I thank the good gentleman from Sarangani for, again, that is your advocacy. I totally respect it. And I salute you for this. Ako naman, Red Crosser po ako. Alam mo kami mga Red Cross, sundal, policeman ang nabaril o kalaban and pay. Ano po namin yan That is our duty to save both lives. Kasi that is humanitarian work as a humanitarian.
Red Cross. Thank you, Mr.
So,
President.
kaya neutral kami, yung Red Crossers. Pero, yun lang po, and a bit of food for thought for the next debates to come.
Thank you, Mr. President, but I would like to answer those questions na sinabi mo. Unang-una, Mr. President, America is not all the states has a death penalty, Mr. President. Only 29 states, Mr. President, has a death penalty. And second is answering those questions of deterrence or not. The constitutions, our constitution, Mr. President, is not talking about or require about deterrence or not. It's required about if this is a heinous or if this is a heinous crimes or not. A compelling reason involving heinous crimes, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Thank you,
I
Mr.
believe the
President.
Minority Floor Leader would like
Yes.
to
Mr. President,
add to the discussions.
the floor was earlier yielded to this representation by the good sponsor. I still have a number of questions, probably 30 minutes to 1 hour. Maybe we can suspend my interpellation until tomorrow, Mr. President, so that we can greet Senator Gordon happy birthday in the lounge. So with that, Mr. President, may I suspend my interpellation and resume tomorrow on the privileged speech of Senator Pacquiao?
I have no problem with that, Mr. President. We can suspend the interpellation.
With that, Mr. President, may we suspend session for a few Senate minutes so that we can partake of the distinguished gentleman from Zambales' preparations for his birthday.
All right, session suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did not refer the speech. I have to refer the speech.
Suspended pa naman.
Mga Oh, yeah. Give you the list. Ready to resume, Mr. President?
Session is resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that this is just to reiterate, for the record, designation of following senators as vice chairman of the following committees. For the Committee on Accountability, Public Officers and Investigation, I designate Senator Sani Angara. And for the Committee on Justice and Human Rights, I designate Senator Panfilo Ping Lacson. And for the Committee on Government Corporations and Public Enterprises, the designate is Senator Win Gatchalian. So moved, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move to elect members of the Committee on Ways and Means. Mr. President, the chair of this prestigious committee is headed by the Honorable Senator Pia Cayetano. Her vice chair, Senator Sani Angara, and members, Senator Christopher Lawrence Bongo, Panfilo Ping Lacson, Senator Richard Dick Gordon, Senator Win Gatchalian, Senator Lito Lapid, Senator De La Rosa Bato, and Senator Francis Tolentino, as well as Senator Manny Pacquiao, Senator Grace Poe, and Senator Bong Revilla. On the part of the minority, Senator Kiko Pangilinan, Senator Risa Ontiveros, and Senator Laila De Lima. I so move.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move as well to elect the members of the Committee on Cultural Communities. Mr. President, the part of the majority, Senator Emmanuel Pacquiao, Senator Nancy Binay, Senator Sani Angara, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa, Senator Richard Gordon, and for the minority, Senator Laila De Lima.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
With that, Mr. President, I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Wednesday, August 7, 2019. I so move, Mr. President.
Session is adjourned.
Thank you.